Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you might be on planet Earth. And welcome to the July 19th episode of Let's Get SASE. This is your one-stop shop for everything SASE from your friends at Cisco. I'm John, and I'll be your SASE MC for this episode. Today's episode is gonna be a blast. SASE is seen from an executive point of view. This is SASE as seen from the business perspective. Why SASE from my business and why now? We're going to explore SASE from an executive point of view, so buckle up. But first, the news. Welcome back to the Let's Get SASE news segment. We're glad you made it. In this week's acquisition news, Cisco has announced the intent to acquire ORT. I'd say most people think ORT refers to a cloud of asteroids beyond our solar system, but actually, ORT is a pioneer in identity threat detection and response, or ITDR, technology that Cisco has been invested in since 2022. ORT exists to secure identity as the new perimeter, and believe that the addition of their identity-centric technology to the Cisco Security Cloud will improve our user context telemetry, allowing us to bolster customer security posture with identity protection solutions that scale to their needs. This acquisition illustrates our continued focus and investment in our security portfolio and is another bold step that we are taking on our AI-driven security cloud journey, ultimately making the world a safer place for humanity. In this week's Talos Spotlight, we invite you to have a look at the Talos Threat Source newsletter. Every week, Talos releases the Threat Source newsletter, coined as all the security news you need to know. This week talks about QR codes and how they relate to the threat environment. Also a reminder to check out the Talos podcast, Beers with Talos. On the latest episode, focusing on emerging threats and other fun security topics like hacking refrigerators, all while enjoying beers. So check it out. And now would be the time, as we like to do, to remind you to hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell so that you can be assured you will never miss another upcoming episode of Let's Get SASE. So let's get down to the main event. We've got an extra special episode today and something a little different. I'd like to reintroduce Alvin Richburg to the show as his first time as host. Alvin's got himself a special guest for everyone today. So take it away, Alvin.
Hey, thanks, John. And hello, everyone out there. It's Alvin again. And they finally let me host an episode being the expert guest. Today we have SASE in Executive View, and with me we have my manager and leader of SASE Team Americas, as well as the hybrid work team here at Cisco, Shamir Barkat. Can you tell us a little bit more about you? And for the sake of all of our sanity, let's chill on those Chicago sports.
All right. Well, so good morning, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, thank you, Alvin, for having me here as a guest speaker. It's my pleasure, absolute my pleasure. So yeah, Chicago sports aside, I've been at Cisco here for 16 years, leading teams for the Americas and looking over what we call the cross architecture teams, which, like you mentioned, includes the SASE team as well as the hybrid work team.
All right, so let's just jump into it. And 16 years is a long time. So we brought you on here today to get a perspective of SASE from someone who has a much bigger picture than, say, me or John or Sarah, or other people who've been on this podcast. So I guess to start off, what is SASE? And I know this can be confusing for a lot of people. So can you describe what it means to you, as well as the industry as a whole, and more in particular, Cisco?
Never heard of it. I have no idea what you're talking about.
What are we doing here?
Yeah. So SASE, right, is an acronym, number one. It stands for Secure Access Services Edge. Okay. And it's a term that was coined by Gartner many years ago, pre-pandemic. And what Gartner saw, which is coming to realization today, is workloads moving to the cloud, right? And so what I mean by that is applications hosted either in a purely SaaS mechanism, or their private applications now moving away from the data center to a public cloud like infrastructure as a service. So that would be your, big players like GCP, Azure, and of course AWS. And so what does it mean to me? I mean, it's kind of, simple, maybe, if I could say it that way. Now, executing and delivering on a full SASE architecture may not be that simple, and I'm not trying to trivialize it. But basically what I'm saying is the idea is, all right, the use case here is I have users that are everywhere, especially post-pandemic. So they're remote, they're on a branch, they're, at a coffee shop, they're home. And so how does that user get to the applications that they need to in the most efficient way? So user experience is very, very important. Securing that user is very, very important. And then how do I actually get the user through the internet to that end resource? And I'm sure you've heard of last mile, right? And there's there's a new concept called the middle mile. And the middle mile is the internet. And if you're a global customer, you know very well how crucial it could be to traverse through multiple cloud exchange points to get from point A to point B. So, it's all about how do I leverage, these policies regardless of where the user is at so that they're unified. And as a network administrator or a security administrator, I can actually operate my business with the same SLAs, same security posture, same deliverables that I had to my business when everything was on net behind a nice perimeter in my data center. So the concepts are still the same, except now kind of the pieces are all over the place. And so the objective that we have here at Cisco is to help our customers really figure out, how do I unify those policies? How do I make it easy to operate end to end, and then, be able to give those actual visibility characteristics across that path?
Wow, that's pretty straightforward there. Nice way of breaking that down. A lot better than I did on my episode. Anyway, the pieces of SASE seem to be different depending on who you ask, what vendor you're talking to, and what your title is. Can you straighten in all of this out for us, at least from a bigger picture?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct, Alvin. What's interesting is depending on the journey, right? We call it the journey, but the customer, they could be in various spots in the life cycle in this journey, if you will. So there are some customers that look at the SASE, journey from a network lens. So they start from the WAN and 5G, DIA, SD-WAN, and then they lead into cloud security and the cloud security aspects. And then there's other customers that may start from the cloud security itself, and then kind of lead into the network. And so, there's SecOps, there's NetOps, there's different buying centers, and so on and so forth. And so depending on who you talk to, the definition slightly changes, right? Like to what you alluded to. What's interesting is that if you actually hold true to the true SASE definition that I articulated before, what you actually get is the superset of everything else that you're trying to accomplish that you hear out in the industry. Because there's buzz terms like SSE now, which is SASE without the A, interestingly enough. And what is the A? The A is the access. And what is the access? That's the SD-WAN network component, okay? So SSE is part of SASE. And then there's ZTNA that you may have heard of, which is Zero Trust Network Architecture. And this is all about least privilege access, right? So how do I give the least privilege access to my users, and be able to then, kind of do a policy-driven environment where I can say, okay, Mr. Mrs. User, you get access to this only. Everything else is automatically denied, right? So that's the concept behind least privilege access. So ZTNA, SSE, all of these kind of terminologies that you hear, the reality is that SASE is the superset of it. And so many customers that we speak to, what we're helping them with is not just these point product or point solution sets, but it's more about the end-to-end architecture. Because if we concentrate on the end-to-end architecture that includes the network, and it takes advantage of all that amazing data that you already have on your network, mapping that into your SASE architecture actually gives the best outcome in that way. So really, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of vocabulary. And so, I would just say, you cannot break physics is what I'll say on this. And what I mean by this is, somehow, there's a computer that is doing some sort of microprocessing, that is doing some sort of level deep packet inspection, IPS, IDS, firewall services, L4 through L7 services in the cloud. And so I don't care what name you put on it, SSC, ZTNA, I don't care. The bottom line is, okay, there's a difference between taking a physical box, virtualizing that and putting it in the cloud and calling it cloud, or growing it truly through a cloud native function. Like cloud native has become such a, like everybody just says we're cloud native, right? But if you go deeper into what that really means, it's the fact that the actual solution, the technology, okay, is truly grown from a cloud perspective. And that changes things because the way that the packets flow through that cloud stack is very important. And who knows more about packets than Cisco, right? And so the idea is we are optimizing that path from point A to point B, taking into account that it is very different than it used to flow from your, access layer in your network to your data center server layer in your server rack, right? Like that's a very different path now that we're taking through the cloud. So anyway, that's my thoughts around it. And hopefully that helps the audience.
Flexing that EE and CCIE you got there, huh? Going deep in the weeds. All right. So what are the actual parts of SASE, and why would you say it's important to consider them a part of a unified framework? I know you alluded to a little bit of that inside of the last question, but dare I say, give us more?
Yeah. No, it's good, Alvin. I think, what's interesting, we at Cisco like to think that, we've innovated for 3 decades and helped customers standardize on fundamental networking aspects. Many of the audience today might have CCNAs or CCNPs or even CCIEs. And what's interesting about it is, like, when you go through those levels of certifications or have been around Cisco networking for any time period, what you'll know is that there are Cisco validated designs out there that really construct networks in a logical format. And that logical format we take for granted, which is, hey, I need access layer switch. Then I need my fiber distribution layer switches. Then I need my modular core switches, right? We think in this way, which is that 3-tier architecture, access, distribution, core, right? I mean, like everybody thinks in this way. And then moreover, these 3-tier architectures are logically separated in blocks. So you may be a network admin that might be working in the campus block. So campus block is your LAN, WLAN functions, right? And then you might have your data center block. That's your data center teams. That's your app, your web, your database, right? Your servers. But it still follows a 3-tier function, right? Top of rack, end of row, middle of row, and so on. And then you have your WAN edge or internet blocks. And similarly, you have your DMZ, you have your egress points, you have your L4 through 7, blah, blah, blah. All of these, the reason I bring all this up, Alvin, is because Cisco's approach to SASE is we're taking the same methodologies that we've had for decades at Cisco, which is giving the customer a logical way to not only configure, but manage and be able to follow the packet through the flow. Instead of just saying, hey, you know what, this is ad hoc, like, let me give you a solution here, let me give you a solution there, and you integrate it together and like, good luck with everything, right? Because that's what happens, right? When you look at SASE today, many customers actually end up with multiple vendors because they want to do this with this vendor, this with this vendor, this with this vendor. And it's like, well, how do I actually integrate all that together? It gets very difficult. So the approach that we've taken is this block concept that I just mentioned, the 3-tier architecture that I just mentioned, and then basically mirroring those concepts into the SASE architecture. So the new 3-tier architecture is actually cloud access, cloud core, cloud orchestration. It's a very logical way of thinking about it, which is cloud access is this concept of how do I get the user to connect in? So that's VPN, that's ZTNA, that's clientless, total clientless, like contractors and such, unmanaged devices. So how do I get the user on the cloud? That's cloud access. Cloud core is L3 to L7 services. So how do I actually route this packet? How do I route this user through my branch or through my internet? Okay. And then from there, which services do I apply? So there's, secure web gateway. There's SIG functionality. There's DLP. There's RBI. There's CASB. I can go on and on. So now I get to pick and choose what I need to enable for that particular user as they traverse through the internet. Okay. And then cloud orchestration is that unification of the policy. So regardless of where I am, as a user, I want to unify that policy and be able to orchestrate in such a way that I have end-to-end visibility across the entire stack. So that to me is in a nutshell what Cisco's doing around the SASE architecture.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things that you touched on, I don't think you went into as much detail as you generally do, as from what I hear. So can you jump into a little bit more about the end-to-end visibility that you referred to at the beginning? Just like why that is of value and why it's something that, while not in the original SASE definition, it was added into, and why we were a market leader in that way.
Yeah, it's a good call out, Alvin, and thanks for bringing that up. I think, as network operations teams or security operations teams, one of the things that we have are some sort of, security log collectors, right? What we call SIMs, right? And so be able to correlate data. That's like something we do, and it's one of those powerful management tools that we have at our disposal. All of a sudden, if you start looking at the SASE architecture, those are one of the biggest things that customers start losing is visibility. So how do I now collect the proper logs from these disparate systems, especially as I traverse the internet? It's like, what the heck? Like, what's happening, right? And so that, you bring up a great point because the ability to troubleshoot is one thing, but the ability to really understand my performance is another thing. Because your application may be delayed by 5 seconds and it could have nothing to do with the network or the security stack, but everything to do with the internet. So our approach here, when you look at that cloud orchestration tier, is to provide true end-to-end, whether it be the underlay or the overlay across the entire stack, right? So when you look at the flow from the user, the actual endpoint itself, what kind of OS is running on it? What's their wireless DB strength, right? Which carrier are they using? All the way through, are they doing IPsec? Are they doing encryption? How are they connecting through the internet? The underlay, which am I hitting Comcast, AT&T, Cox? What provider am I hitting, and what routing hops am I going through? All the way to, let's say I'm going into AWS. Which AWS data center am I going to, right? So, and then eventually to the actual application. So now imagine I get the latency. I get to see exactly that path. Okay. And then if I choose to, I can actually dynamically set my rules such that I can pick the best path always based on my jitter and my loss and so on that I have configured. So that's the visibility aspect of that.
Okay, yeah, that's actually perfect into the next question I have, because you tied it right into where's the value in that. So from a business perspective, what are the primary business outcomes C-suite level leaders are, but they should be considering when looking to move into a SASE architecture? So you've already given us visibility. Let us know the rest.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And if any of the audience here went to Cisco Live 2023 in Vegas here in the US, you got to prelude into this a little bit, right? Which is this standardization of our platforms. It's a huge thing, right? And I don't think we're making as big of a deal as we should, to be honest. And so like, if you look at all of our networking platforms that we have today, so think about, DNA Center, think about vManage, think about, ICE, think about Thousand Eyes, think about all these different platforms that you may have as a customer today. And then on the security side, you have Umbrella, you have Duo, you have all these other platforms as well. And if you have any of these, that the look and feel are slightly different between each of them. Maybe, the widgets are set up differently. Maybe the drop downs are separate, so on and so forth. What Cisco announced at Live is two things. One is called the Cisco Networking Cloud, and the other is called the Cisco Security Cloud. And the idea behind these is that we are standardizing on a singular platform. Now, is it a single pane of glass for everything? No. Okay. But what I'm saying is that you go into the networking cloud, for example, and from there, you can pick and choose the platforms that you have and be able to log into those and now have the same experience unified across all the platforms.
So you're saying Cisco is going to make it easier to manage? That's
right, which historically we've not, right? And so, so I think, that's why I find it such a compelling, a news event, if you will, is that we are going to make it easier. It's the pure. So when you ask what is, the C-suite, quite frankly, not just the C-suite, but customers, period, care about, okay? It's not just about SASE, to be honest. It's about simplification. I don't want to say we want to be the single vendor for every single entity in your environment. That's not realistic to say. But what I do want to say is be able to come back and say, look, you have one portal. And from that portal, you could be the NetOps person or the SecOps person and have a very similar experience in managing SASE, right? Or hybrid work, or fill in the blank. That's the vision, right? And that's the execution that's been committed by our executives, and all of our development teams are working restlessly. Matter of fact, one of the big new announcements that came out was called Cisco Secure Access, which is our SSC solution. And this secure access is actually built on the security cloud, right? So that's our first kind of leap into this. On the networking side, we are already doing this with the Meraki dashboard and cloud management of Catalyst switches, if you will, and wireless devices, right? So that's already begun on the networking side, and now we see it happening on the security side as well. So very, very exciting. But business outcomes wise, it's all about cost savings. It's all about operations. It's all about single vendor potentially being able to provide as many aspects of that SASE journey as possible. And then, of course, simplification.
Well, that's outstanding. I'm glad to be here for it too, because I've been in the field before deploying things and just like, this dashboard does this console does this. Seems like they're making it a lot easier on us, which saves businesses a lot of times, especially because coming from a consulting background, I mean, the hours rack up.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, that's the last question I had. Do you have anything else to share? If not, thank you very much.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me, of course. I would just recommend to the audience here, reach out to your account team if you want to know more about what's happening on the SASE side. More than happy to help engage, and see you guys in the field. Thank you.
All right, John, you can have it back.
Thanks, Alvin. That really was a great conversation. I think that's about all the time we have for today. I want to thank Alvin and Shamir both for those exciting executive insights into SASE. If you have any questions or want to dig deeper into SASE, your Cisco sales team is the place to start. They can help you along your journey to SASE, no matter where you might be going. Tune in next time for our next episode, where we're going to dig deep into how SASE can solve your remote access problems. Should be a good one. So until next time, I'm your SASE MC, John. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you right here soon for the next episode of Let's Get SASE.